Greetings, Futurama fans. Welcome to Professor Farnsworth's Science of a Scene. More like the science of DVD marketing, if you ask me, but I digress. It takes nearly a year to produce an episode of Futurama and requires the efforts of literally hundreds of talented folks. Yet it takes just one annoying jerk to cancel it. But I digress. We take you now behind the scenes to witness the creation of a brain-boggling sequence from the episode Overclockwise. So sit back, put your teeth in a cup, and see for yourself why top critics call Futurama, quote, an animated television show.
Anybody?
It's weird because in a way, this scene is very different from like a normal, sequence from an episode. I mean, it has giant bender.
And now the entire universe is my processor.
This one was meant as our season finale. With every Futurama season finale, it could be a series finale. So they went really big on this episode.
But Randy said...
Randy! Have you been hanging out with Randy?
Matt and David are both really, highly involved in the story process. So they, try to, pick a story that's as like, as grand as possible.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some new heavy elements to create. Better cover your nads. It may get a little non-Newtonian in here.
The production of Futurama is really a long pipeline where the writers are the beginning of the pipeline and the animators are most of the rest of the pipeline. So once you write the script and the actors record it, you put in this pipeline, it becomes very hard to make a change because the animators have worked for months. So if you make a change, it has this ripple effect and it causes big delays. So I have just found over the years that life is easier if we kill ourselves at the beginning and make sure we have a story that works.
I like that thing about the pipeline. It's what you send through the pipeline that's important. It's not sludge, okay? It's got to be sweet comedy syrup.
We start usually with a smaller group of people talking about just the very basic idea. Then we open it up to the whole room, which is a room full of writers, and get everyone's jokes and ideas piled on top of this. And really, only once we have this huge amount of material does a single writer then take all these notes and go out and write the first draft of the script. And the idea is, again, we want to get everything polished up to a shine before we hand it to the animators. So the writers do their piece, we hand it up to the actors who record the show and they do their thing. I think in this process you're really trusting everybody else down the line. So you gotta work with good people and that's what we do. Rolling. This is scene 15, take 1, with giant inside-out bender. Action.
But Bender? What happened to you?
I'll try to put it in terms you can comprehend. I passed the existential singularity.
One of the great things is recording the actors together. In animation, you don't have to. You can record actors in any combination, and most people do it that way. But what we try to do on Futurama is have as many actors together at the same time to bounce things off of each other.
Human emotion no longer concerns me.
But Randy said...
Randy? Have you been hanging out with Randy? Oh, I bet he's real happy now that I'm transfigured.
These actors are so fantastic that they take the written word, which we spend a lot of time on and care a lot about, and then they kick it up to a different level.
If everything is a chess game for you, you must know how to help me.
I'm sorry, Fry, but some games you just can't win. Cubert and the professor are guilty. The jury will vote to convict. I can't change that.
So maybe it's a line which is not that funny in itself, but the actors will find some way to keep you riveted to the screen.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some new heavy elements to create. Better cover your nads. It may get a little non-Newtonian in here.
Great, let's cut. That was great.
Hearing the voices first is hugely important to the board artist and the director because the acting really sort of originates from the voice actor, and it's really our job to make sure whatever we do in the physical acting of the characters to the animation matches the voice performance.
You don't know their relationship to each other until you hear the volume in their voice. Are they intimate? Are they, shouting? It's just sort of like, then I have an idea of what the scope is, and then I can choose my shots accordingly.
You want to have your dialogue before you start drawing the acting. The acting is always going to be something better than what you imagined it, so you really have to have it when you're storyboarding.
Better cover your nads. It may get a little non-Newtonian in here.
That's good.
Yeah. Woo!
Nice.
This facility will take the dialogue record material, put it together in a dialogue edit to get the timings right for all the characters. It will then go off-site in Glendale at Rough Draft Studios. They will put storyboards up against the dialogue that we've cut here.
So the script has been done, and the voices have been recorded, and now it comes to me and our staff here at Rough Draft. It's a kind of an inside-out vendor, and we're doing the designs for that kind of as we storyboard.
Because this is basically a new design, part of what I have to do as a storyboard artist is to try to sell the idea not only to the writers and producers, but also to Raimi, my director.
As a director, I would say a big percentage of my job is to just delegate. So it's like making sure that the right person gets the right kind of sequence. If the scene is somewhere we've never been before, we have to go through a process that has to be kind of like internalized between him and I before I hand it out. And usually I end up just handing it back to Alden and say, go with it.
So we've got the inside of his head, and it's supposed to be shaped like his head, and it's got all of these turbines and generators inside of it. So the initial work goes into visualizing the space and break down the scene.
They read the script page that you have a giant bender that, Fry is inside of, and they've got to design it in a way that, you get the scale of it, but it still works for animation.
It's a really visually rich idea. We run with that and see what we can do to make it as cool looking as possible.
Usually we don't do the entire storyboard in color. In this case, though, you can use color to kind of accentuate certain things that you want to accentuate in the board or in a design. Definitely in this case, we're trying to go for sort of this kind of glowing green pulsing circuitry aligning the walls of what's basically the inside of his head.
What I like is that there's so much value in the held image. It's like you have one setup and it has gravitas.
It really, took a lot of work on Rough Draft's part to, design this and storyboard this scene in a way that really made sense.
From the storyboard process, we go to our storyboard animatics.
After the storyboard's finished, I get the digitized panels, I get the pre-edited audio, and what I do is put them together, basically to see if it flows, to see if it plays okay, to see if the laughs happen where they're supposed to, and just to see how the whole thing's gonna work.
Up to that point, it's just kind of playing in your head. So it isn't until that moment you know that something has worked and is working properly.
Bender? What happened to you?
I'll try to put it in terms you can comprehend. I passed the existential singularity.
Try harder.
Once we screen the animatic with Matt and David and the writers, we usually do a very respectable notes pass, probably, on their side and on our side.
So here I'm working with an animatic edit that came from Rough Draft Studios. They did a cut using our dialogue edit as a source, and now we have some rewrites, we have some changes we want to make, we have some timing things that need to change, so we're going to go ahead and do that here. So at this point what you're looking at is all very much temporary. You can recognize the characters, you can see what the action is going to be, but until you get it back in color, you can't fully appreciate how good it's all going to look.
We make revisions based on those notes, and that all goes into final timing, which is basically an animation timer giving the animators in Korea frame-by-frame instructions.
We want the audience to feel the power of Bender's transformation, of what he has become. The director's called for many different effects to be used in this scene, and it's my job to time all these out. Now at this stage, Bender has grown huge, he's transformed himself. We have the water splashes coming off the turbines, and that's listed here. Turbines turn, water splashes out like waves breaking over a pier. So we have to make sure that that's listed. It's going to be a very, very fast action. So we're playing with all these different elements. All of them have been drawn on separate levels, and it's my job to time out how long they each take so that when it goes over to Korea, they're able to put this together and everything looks like one beautiful scene.
So we basically take all the elements we create for an episode here, which we consider our pre-production materials, storyboard, designs, animatic, and final timing. We ship those overseas to Rough Draft Korea.
Ooh, Rough Draft Korea, located in the city of Seoul, 5,956 miles from Futurama's Los Angeles headquarters. To give you an idea of just how far that is, it would take the Planet Express ship over 4 seconds to cover the distance. Pretty far, eh? Here, over 100 talented animators will spend nearly 4 months hand-drawing an average of 25,000 frames for just one episode of Futurama. These are then scanned, crammed full of glorious digital color, and returned to the crew in Los Angeles, some 5,956 miles from Seoul. Pretty far, eh? But I digress.
There's been a lot of work has gone into getting it to this point, and everyone is really excited about seeing what it's going to look like when it all comes together in full color. This is really the last chance we have to get the timing and the pacing of the overall show where we want it. The scene looks so great as it is that I don't want to do a lot of changes internally on the scene, just the heads and tails to get the pacing between all these cool shots together. And sitting with David, we'll come up with the final pacing for this particular episode.
Our editors, Paul and Chris, go through all of this stuff for hours and days before I ever come in, so I'm looking at something pretty good already at the point I come in. And when I do come in, we're looking at a lot of things. Maybe just a fine timing change could be made, or we could freeze one little thing in the background to draw all your attention to where the joke is in the frame. But it's very painstaking, but to me it's actually one of the most fun parts of my job. We can right on the spot with the digital editing make the changes I want to see. It's very satisfying.
I'm sorry, Fry, but some games you just can't win.
So there's where we need to redo the eyes. To me it seems like it'd be funnier if the pupils were focused, so he went cross-eyed at that point. These are options in animation that you don't have in live action.
I'm sorry, Fry, but some games you just can't win.
Once we're really happy with the picture and the pacing of it and it's locked, we'll actually send it over to the mix where they will actually do the final mix, put all the final audio pieces together.
The biggest difference on how this show is mixed versus other shows, typically on a half-hour show you go blast through it in a 9-hour day and then you come back for half a day and you do fixes. All in all, probably spend a week on this mix, which is just really unusual.
It's a comedy, but there's no laugh track. That immediately makes it very different from a live action show, and what that means is there's a lot more space to fill with sound effects and music.
This scene, we probably have 20 or 30 tracks of sound effects. It's really about weeding through the sound effects and deciding which ones support the scene and which ones we don't need.
In the scene that we're talking about, Bender has become gigantic, so of course that takes some work on Peter's part to make Bender sound bigger than usual. I don't even know exactly what he does. I often give a note that says, make Bender sound, quote, bigger.
I get notes like this. Okay, here's typically it's 4 or 5 pages of single-spaced notes with timecode numbers and detailed notes about what needs to change. I don't know, how long have I been doing this show now? On and off, we've been together 10 years. Every time I get this, I go, oh God, I'm gonna be fired. Okay, nobody does this, okay? And what amazes me is I go through these notes. They are so right on, and you wanna smack yourself, go, why didn't I think of that?
There are certain notes I always give. For example, no matter how loud it is, if mom slaps her sons, I will give the note louder. Matt Groening really laid the foundation of the sound of Futurama. I remember a classic lesson he taught me was when people are having a fight, you emphasize the sounds of the person who's getting hurt rather than the person who is grunting and attacking the other person. He's worked out a lot of the comedy theory of the sound mix.
This goes back to an episode of The Simpsons in which Homer was in a big fist fight with Smithers of all people, and we got the animation back. It was just horrifying, because there was all this sounds of exertion. And then we took out all the sounds of exertion after many different kinds of experiments. And when we just left in sounds of pain and misery, agony, people started laughing.
There's a lot of very tiny changes that do affect the final product, and I feel I'm really on edge the entire time till it's done, and then I feel very relieved that we have A, made it sound good, but B, not lost any of the comedy we had before, and then hopefully actually added a lot to it during this process.
It's a tedious process, but it's really, really fun and creative, and I never stop learning.
Once they combine all the new sound design and music, and everyone's happy with the final mix, it comes back here, and we add the mix to the final picture, and we actually output right from the system to a tape that goes on the air.
The fact is, the show is a collaborative effort. That's the nature of animation, of great writers, great actors, great animators, and great musicians.
I think something that works in Futurama's favor is that everybody is a fan of the show, but also everyone is proud of the show.
We are all fans of the show, and when we're not working on the show, we're hoping that we'll be working on the show again.
We all work very hard to put whatever's written on that page on the screen in the best way that we can.
We all love working on Futurama. We definitely, you know, like working on other projects as well, but I think every time we start up Futurama, it's really like going home again. So, look at that.
The idea that the sky's the limit as far as ambition for a comedic idea, that applies to every aspect of the show. So everybody wants to give extra. I think everybody really, really loves this show who works on it.
Well said, Matt Groening. Now get a haircut and a real job. Anyway, that concludes the Science of a Scene. To learn more about Futurama, visit your local television. You'll be glad you did. Toodaloo.